Welcome back, or welcome to the channel. My name is Eric, and today you guys had shown an interest in welding and what we do at the shop when it comes to welding and what type of equipment do we have, right? So I guess the best way to start off is you have plasma cutter. Now, if you're working on a deck and you want to cut out a nice perfect, I mean you can use a set of torches, but you're going to get a lot of slag and a lot of rough edges. And you could also use a cutoff wheel, and that would get you somewhat close. But with this girl, it's 220, and on the back of it, it's got a place to snap on an air hose. This is run by air and electric. And you simply just take this, attach the ground to the piece of equipment you're working on, and then just take, if it was this, if you had this hooked to that, you would just get as close as you could without touching, and then just take and give it the air. There's a button that allows the air to come through, and you can adjust it here of how much air to how hot you want to get it. This plasma cutter that's 220 will cut what do I say, 5/16 maybe. You know, it's not made for cutting thick steel, but it works great when you're working on decks, you know, the light metal, or even, you know, it will cut through this with no problem. But a plasma cutter is nice to have just for that reason, is you have more control, and as you're following the line, you don't need one of the auto darkening helmets. A lot of times when I'm using this, I just wear a pair of safety sunglasses, and of course you want something to cover your hands when you're doing it. Alright? The other thing I would suggest for any of this is we have a couple sets of these. They're like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde outerwear. But put this on, and a lot of your slag and your sparks and all that stuff that come off will reflect off from this. Where with this t-shirt, it will start burning a hole in it. And if you have nylon that you're wearing, I've seen that just torch fire quick. So you got to know the safety gear to have to go with it, right? So Harbor Freight sells these. If you look around welding stores. Alright, so that's our plasma cutter. But again, you need 220 to operate it. Alright, so we've got a Hobart 220, and this is a wire feed, and with this one you have a lot of heat ranges, okay? With the one that I've got, which is the Toolmate 100, this runs on 110. This setting goes from 1 to 4. That's as hot as it can get, is 4. This one can go all the way up to 7. The top, where it runs from 10 to 100, is the speed that you're having the wire come through the system. And a lot of times if you're on 3 or 4, and that's the big question I do get asked, is when you're working on a deck, can you do it with this? Absolutely. You can hook up this with 220, but whereas I might set this one to 2 or 3 depending on the heat range that I want. This one also has 1, 2, 3, 4 that one does. This one here, you can get hotter if you want to get hotter. And then your speed. I tend to run right around 32, 33, and usually on the setting 3. That seems to work the best for me. And the nice thing is you don't get a lot of slag with these. Now, if you're, what's the right way? If you're starting out or if you've got a small shop and stuff, don't go crazy. You know, they're nice toys to have. I call them toys. But this one and my two stick welders get used a lot because we're working on heavier pieces of equipment. Now, when you're using this, the one thing that we don't do with this is if you have where you're trying to fill in a lot of space, and if you're trying to fill like a gap in your welding, you might better use the stick feed and fill that gap in. And the other thing that I would mention, like with this one here, I think is around $700, $800 now for just this unit. This one here I bought 14, 15 years ago, and I give around 3 for this one. Now, you can, if you go to Harbor Freight, you can get a wire feed 110 welder. And I think when I looked the other day, they were running right around 119, 120. They're an off-the-wall brand, but if you're just going to be using it here and there on decks, you're only out $115, $119 versus 3 for a brand name. Hobart makes the Auto Art. That's the 110 version for the regular plug-in, the 120. And then they have their name on the big stuff. But as you can see, it's the same color, same everything, because this is a Hobart. I stayed with the Hobarts because they have quality behind them. And if I'm going to buy something, I'm going to buy something decent. That's the way I always looked at it. But the Hobart that I've got in here, I could do AC DC with. The Hobart that I've got out there in the shop with Claude is only AC. DC is direct current, you know that, and AC is just alternating current. Most stuff that you can do is with AC. There's certain situations where it comes in handy to go with the DC side, but for the most part, AC, you can't run like the 7018s and that, where on the DC side you can run the 7018s, the 7050, the 70 series is the first 2 numbers in it. Alright, the other difference between this and that, other than this is 220, that's 110, this has got higher heat settings on it, but the how fast the wire feed comes through is the same, the on and off switch. But this on the back has got a port where you can hook it up to argon. And you're running MIG right now. These are both MIG welders. And with the added argon, you don't get any amount of slag and it comes out real shiny. If that probably is the easiest way to explain it. We don't use the argon. I don't feel the need for it. My other son, Zach, if I need any welding done, specialty welding, he's got the MIG, TIG, he's got the whole 9 yards. So if I'm going to do some specialty welding, like let's say on aluminum or on cast, stainless, I'm going to have Zach do it because he's qualified to do it. He is certified up the yin-yang on welding. That's his livelihood. And he worked for Elon Musk with their space shuttles for a couple of years, and he was doing the welding on the actual rockets. Tell you how good a welder he is. So you can add argon to this if you want a shiny surface, you know, and they're both running flux core as far as the line. And when you go to buy it, it comes in like a white package like this. And both of these run the 0.030 inch diameter wire. And it comes in handy because I'll buy 5 or 6 of these, put them on the shelf, and they will fit this one or that one. They're both, it's interchangeable. This one has the ability to get like the great big huge rolls you put in it, where that one doesn't. Now, my suggestion to you, well, either direction you decide to go, if you decide to go with the 110 or the 220, first starting out, 110 is great, 220 gives you more options, more heat settings. But if you're going to work on a deck and you haven't done it before, what I suggest is find a piece of metal that's about the same thickness, or cut it off something else, and then try to see what kind of, is it cutting through, is it too hot, or do you need to back off it, or is it puddling up on it? Because it should be a nice smooth, you're arcing it like this, you're moving your hand, where with stick welding you're coming down on it and you're puddling it as you go, or you can come up on it and puddling it as you go. This here, it's more of a swinging motion is the best way I can describe it. But if you use a practice piece, is what I'm getting at, you know, you can fine tune your heat, and then when it goes to actually welding on that deck, you're all set. I can tell you that most decks, lawnmower decks off the little heavier duty reinforced, like Cub Cadets, John Deere's, and those, I can get up to a 3 and to a 4 with a between a 30 to a 40 for how fast the wire feed's going to come through for me. It's just from experience, from doing it. Now this here is my Hobart AC/DC. It's the same principle as both of them. You've got a ground, you hook it to your piece of metal that you're welding on or equipment, and then you simply, some guys like to do it like that. I'm going to get it here in the jaws and work your way down. Other guys like to take and bend it like that, and then where you got an angle on it is where some guys like to do it. But that's, if you're going to be using it to where you're trying to mold in 2 pieces of steel and you got a gap in it, go with this, because the rod is cheaper and it will get it done a lot faster with welding it with a stick weld and then it will with either one of these. It's the only downfall of these is if you're going to weld on something that's heavier and you're trying to fill in the gap, you're going to go through a lot of with a spool, and it's going to take you 3 to 4 times as long as it would be if you just grabbed 70-18 rod over DC and then went ahead and welded, if that makes sense. But when you're using this and this and this, you need to have a welding helmet for any one of the 3. What I have here is it's a Lincoln. It's a little better, Lincoln Electric, a little bit better. You can buy these at Harbor Freight. I don't know how much they are. I think this one was like $180 or something. But I bought quality, and I've got the set up here where I can change the lenses. I have spare lenses up there, so if you get any slag, like if you're welding like this, sometimes you get slag here. You just pop this out, put in a new piece of glass, and off you go. I like the auto darkening, so when you're looking through it, it's got a little bit of a green tint, but you can see exactly where your tip is on your wire feet or your tip is on your stick feet. And the minute that arcs, it darkens, it auto darkens, so that you're not getting that flash. But if you can see where you're going down, and when it makes that arc so that it darkens it, you can see just as well how well you're pushing your rod or your wire feet as you're going, because it's high, bright intensity light, and it will burn your eyes. I learned back when I was in my 20s, I wasn't too smart, and my father-in-law used to do a lot of welding, and I didn't pay any attention. I wasn't looking directly at it, but I was around him most of the time when he was welding one day. And you want to talk about a migraine headache that will just feels like your whole head is ready to explode. Watch somebody weld for a little bit. You'll learn the hard way. And again, I recommend that you use covering on whether you're welding, plasma cutting, so that any of the arcs, any of the slag that gets kicked off doesn't get on you to where you're going to get burnt. So hopefully this is kind of giving you guys an idea, a little more idea on where each one and when to use them, when's best to use them. Heavier metal, or you're trying to fill in cracks, go with the AC/DC welder with a stick. Tack welding, these work great, or even, you're moving it really slow across where you're just filling in a small hairline crack, which you would on most decks, on lawnmower decks, is where I use this the most, the 110. We've got this one, but this one here will plug into a regular outlet, and it's pretty handy. You can throw it in the back of the truck, wherever else you want, and just run it off a generator. So on that note, guys, if you got any questions or comments, I know that some of you guys out there are welders, and you're going to correct me on some things, and you're going to add to it, which is just what I want, okay? On that note, you guys have a great day.